Hello, everybody, and welcome to Topic 2. My name's Alastair Creelman from Linnaeus University in Sweden, with our lovely castle near the campus behind me. I'm being joined for this topic on open education by a colleague and fellow open network learning collaborator in Singapore.
Hello, everyone, and it's wonderful to be joining it again on this topic. I'm Kiruthika Ragupathi from the National University of Singapore, and in this topic, we will be talking to you about open education.
So we're going to give you a little bit of a starter here, a short video with some things to think about, and then we'd like to hear from you on Padlet with your reflections and questions, and we promise we will answer them. So, Kiru, about open education, why a park?
Yeah, so looking at this photograph, what do you think about it? For me, it was about enjoying the freedom that the wide open spaces offered. The open space, the open road, the open access, having an open mind to appreciate the enormous possibilities that openness can offer, the vivid imaginations. But it's also thinking about the dangers lurking in those shadows.
Yes, people can be playing games or having a barbecue maybe, or just enjoying each other's company, sharing things. And open education can be like this. It can be a green field. It can be a place where we can share and enjoy each other's company and learn from each other. However, on the other side of this park, which has so many positive opportunities by day, once the darkness falls, it's a very different place. And we could see that that's in a way the other side of open education. Sometimes it's dark, there are shadows. You don't really want to be there when it's dark, and you don't know what could be lurking in the shadows. There is a dark side to the net. There is a flip side to openness. And we'd like to introduce some concepts to you about openness. There are many different interpretations of openness. It's like, in a way, an onion with many layers. How open do you want to be? How open are you prepared to be? There is no right answer. There are many pedagogical models in openness. There are many levels to choose between. There's a lot of open material out there. We talk about open educational resources, OER. You can find teaching resources, mountains of it, in places like OER Commons, Merlot, OpenLearn, MIT courseware. You can go through this slide and check the links. Universities and teachers who are sharing lectures, exercises, lab work, and so on freely with anyone, and you can use them. There are massive open online courses, so-called MOOCs, that many of you have no doubt attended. There are many other models. There's the OER University. There's University of the People that offer low price or free open education with real credentials at the end. And there are courses on course aggregators like Udemy and Skillshare where you can learn micro learning. You can learn short open online courses in skills that you might need for your work. The key to all of this is Creative Commons licensing. Most things in the world are automatically copyright, and that means you can't use them without the author's permission. However, if you as an author create a video or a text or a photograph and you put it on the net and you add a Creative Commons license, that means you're giving permission in advance. People don't need to ask you to actually use your resources. There are different levels of Creative Commons. The simplest is the one that's called attribution, where the attribution tells you that you can use this resource as long as you give credit to me as the author. That's all you have to do. Otherwise, do what you like. That's always the case. You can also add a non-commercial label saying you can do what you like with this, but you have to credit me as the author, but you may not use it commercially. The third version means that you can use my resource, but you have to give me credit, and you may not change it in any way, not even translate it or Photoshop it. You have to use it as it is. And the final one is that you can use my resource as long as you credit me, attribution, but you share it with a Creative Commons license, the same one as I've shared it in the beginning. This means that we have a scale of openness from copyright, which is pretty well closed. You can't touch a copyright material without the author's permission, all the way through different Creative Commons licenses to public domain, which you can use completely freely without credit. It simplifies copyright. Find out more at creativecommons.org. Kiru.
Thank you, Alastair. Let's move a little bit towards the open education movement itself. So, as we know it, when we think about education, it is inherently an enterprise of openness, sharing, and generosity. And within this movement, the perceptions of openness also tends to vary for different groups of individuals. In the rest of this presentation, what we will do is we will look at two different groups, the open educators and open learners, and try and to see how we can have a deep understanding of openness from their perspectives. So if I'm looking at the educator's perspective, open education is simply characterized by how educators work, collaborate, and publish in ways that favor accessibility, sharing, transparency, and interoperability. So let's look at each one of them. If I'm looking at accessibility, accessibility is the key to open education. Learning is made accessible simply by allowing free access. It doesn't cost money to access the learning, the materials, or the resources. So, what happens here is the barriers are removed and equal opportunities are provided for all who wish to access the learning. Accessibility, again, is something that you need to consider at all levels and all aspects of education. So, it's always important to ask yourself who is able to access and who is not. And you also need to consider things like what's closed access then, such as language, cultural context, those with different learning needs, special learning needs. So all of these things is something that you really need to consider. The second aspect that you need to think about is sharing. Education, for one, is always based upon sharing. Sharing knowledge does not diminish it. It's like a flame, right? So sharing only spreads. If I'm not sharing what I know, if I'm not able to actually give you feedback, try to engage with you in conversations like this, the give and take, then there is simply no education, right? In the age old tradition, what was happening was teachers shared the knowledge and information to students. But now we live in a completely different world, which is abundant in knowledge. The knowledge is ubiquitous. So content is much more accessible. When this happens, our approach to teaching can change, but basically the sharing itself still remains. The value of sharing does not change. This is where we start thinking about, rather than always going back and reinventing the wheel, as educators, we should be able to share our programs, share our curriculum, our approaches to assessment, research, and so on. Students, on the other hand, they also can share their work. They will be thinking about sharing their experiences, with their peers, and benefiting from each other on the social learning itself, right? Through feedback, through discussion, through collaboration, and so on. So basically, we need to foster this openness by fading away or completely removing this hierarchical relation of teachers and learners, and to allow for open sharing by enabling anyone to inhabit any role in the discussions. So that's really about sharing. The next feature is transparency. An open practitioner is one who publicly shares his or her practice and thinking. And that's what being transparent is all about. So when we start becoming transparent in our educational practice, we also will start recognizing that our students are actually co-creators and co-learners of the knowledge, and they're not simply empty vessels but they actually bring with them a set of prior knowledge which we then need to use. And finally, it is the interoperability. And this dates very way back to open source, where it was on the sharing of the source code of programs, operating systems, and so on. But thinking about open approach to creating and sharing of resources, it also introduces the aspects of interoperability. So every teacher, every university starts generally creating their own resources. But once they start making it, it is resources become, as Alastair was talking about, making it Creative Commons, then others can actually start taking it and start making it much more context oriented to their own context. Okay, so now that we saw from the educator's perspective, let's move on to what do we need to think about when we talk about learner's perspective. From the learner's point of view, there are four content that needs to come up here. It's open content, awareness, accessibility, and association with communities are key aspects. Let's start with the first one. Open content, it really refers to any kind of content that's published under an open license and can be accessed free of charge. So content usually is materials, resources, and so on. The second, actually, which is much more important, is awareness. Awareness is something that plays a significant role in the success and failure of access. If learners are simply not aware of the existence of such open content and learning, then it becomes open learning becomes virtually impossible. Again, accessibility comes back it again, where we need to talk about decoupling it from location and people or specific groups. The last but more important again is the association with learning communities, which really has a major impact in and role in open learning. This is probably because you will also be evident from your own experience participating in this ONL course, right? How the ONL community supports this open learning, the social networking that you're relying on, the promise of participation and equality. You're also talking about the PBL communities where you are in, the larger ONL community, which enables social dialogue, interaction, communications, and collaboration. So to end off this presentation, recently Audrey Waters in a book titled Open at the Margins, Critical Perspectives on Open Education, laments about how the word open tends to be added on without really trying to embrace openness to the practices or to their mission. So she then asks, whatever does openness mean? And she talks about many ways of looking at it, and that's what we have shared it on the screen. Having many meanings, many interpretations can be a strength. However, it can easily become a problem when the term becomes so widely applied and it then becomes rendered really meaningless.
Indeed. So we want you to reflect on this. What does open mean to you? What are the restrictions of openness? What are the opportunities of openness? And write it on the Padlet page and we will respond. So this has just been a little starter about openness. It's a tricky question. Does open mean free? And what does free mean nowadays? If the product is free, then you are the product, they say. Thank you for listening. We look forward to a good discussion.
Thank you for listening.